President Joe Biden has just announced he's going to impose a range of strong sanctions on Moscow, saying Russia has undeniably acted against Ukraine. Let's take a listen to what those measures will entail.
This is the beginning of a Russian invasion of Ukraine, as he indicated and asked permission to be able to do from his Duma. So let's begin to, I'm going to begin to impose sanctions in response far beyond the steps we and our allies and partners implemented in 2014. And if Russia goes further with this invasion, we stand prepared to go further as with sanctions. Who in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare new so-called countries on territory that belong to his neighbors? This is a flagrant violation of international law and demands a firm response from the international community. We're implementing full blocking sanctions on two large Russian financial institutions, VEB and their military bank. We're implementing comprehensive sanctions on Russia's sovereign debt. That means we've cut off Russia's government from Western financing. It can no longer raise money from the West and cannot trade in its new debt on our markets or European markets either. Starting tomorrow and continuing in the days ahead, we'll also impose sanctions on Russia's elites and their family members. They share in the corrupt gains of the Kremlin policies and should share in the pain as well. And because of Russia's actions, we've worked with Germany to ensure Nord Stream 2 will not, as I promised, will not move forward. As Russia contemplates its next move, we have our next move prepared as well. Russia will pay an even steeper price if it continues its aggression, including additional sanctions. The United States will continue to provide defensive assistance to Ukraine in the meantime, and will continue to reinforce and reassure our NATO allies. Today, in response to Russia's admission that it will not withdraw its forces from Belarus, I have authorized additional movements of U.S. forces and equipment already stationed in Europe to strengthen our Baltic allies, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Let me be clear. These are totally defensive moves on our part. We have no intention of fighting Russia. We want to send an unmistakable message, though, that the United States, together with our allies, will defend every inch of NATO territory and abide by the commitments we made to NATO.
Let's now bring in senior U.S. correspondent Mikewagenheim, who joins us live from New York. Good evening, Mike. Look, we just heard a little bit from President Biden there, but what are some other main points that he brought up?
Well, listen, he's trying to go now for level one. It's the first tranche of sanctions, as the White House put it. It's basically, here's our first punch. Here's our first jab. You go further, we're going to punch harder. Now, some of these sanctions experts saying, especially when it comes to the banks, not really going to have much of an effect. VB is essentially a slush fund for the Russian elites. Anyway, the U.S. hasn't gone after the state-owned banks, the big banks that would affect the Russian populace, which, could hurt Putin's popularity, could hurt the popularity for this particular invasion. The elites, yeah, that's another step that the Biden administration was looking at, going after this lifestyle of luxury that these Russian elites are able to lead outside of Russia, in America, in Europe. You take that away, you take basically the pleasure of being an oligarch away, then maybe those oligarchs will start to put pressure on Putin as well. So these are the first steps. They didn't go as far as the Americans and the Europeans as cutting off Russia from the dollar or other European currency. They still have some bullets left in the gun here. They say if Putin goes further, they're willing to go further as well. It seems to be a tit for tat right now. Again, this is not deterrence per se. This is punishment. Others wanted deterrence in advance of a possible invasion. This just wasn't in the White House's plans.
And Mike, tell me what happened then at this emergency session at the UN Security Council.
Yeah, late last night, Ukraine called for an emergency session of the 15-member body. Russia, which has the presidency of the council right now, said we should handle this behind closed doors. Other members of the council said, no, we need to have this out in the open. This really turned into a lot of symbolism over substance because Russia has a veto there at the UN, so they can veto any action. But A lot of countries on the council, just about everybody outside of Russia and China, going to bat here for Ukraine. Let's give a listen to a few of these ambassadors last night.
And
Russia's President Vladimir Putin announced that Russia will recognize as independent states the so-called DPR and LPR regions, the sovereign territory of Ukraine, an area controlled by Russia's proxies since 2014. He has since announced that he will place Russian troops in these regions. He calls them peacekeepers. This is nonsense. We know what they really are.
We
remain open to diplomacy for a diplomatic solution. However, allowing a new bloodbath in Donbass is something we do not intend to do. Unfortunately, we are forced to note the extremely negative role played in all of this by our Western colleagues, led by the USA.
Russia's clear attack on Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity is unprovoked. It is an attack on Ukraine's status as a UN member state. It violates a basic principle of international law, and it defies our charter.
We are committed to a peaceful and diplomatic path, and we will stay firmly on it. We are on our land. We are not afraid of anything or anyone. We owe nothing to anyone, and we will not give away anything to anyone. There should be no doubts whatsoever.
Уважаемые коллеги, distinguished colleagues, I would like to call upon our Western colleagues to think twice, to set emotions to one side and not to make the situation worse. No one other than you can hold back the militaristic plans of Kiev and force it to stop the shelling and provocations against the Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics, which in these new conditions could have extremely dangerous consequences.
The United Nations is sick. That's a matter of fact. It's been hit by the virus spread by the Kremlin. Will it succumb to this virus? It is in the hands of the membership.